The mysterious story of Oshikiri? One night in a certain mansion, Fuji, a female student who is lost inside, feels scared and confused until she encounters Oshikiri, who is staring at her. He tries to hold her to help her regain her composure, but as soon as she sees him, she screams and pleads to be let go, asking to return home and not to be harmed. Her words make him suspicious about what he might have done to her before she manages to shake off his hand and tries to run away. However, suddenly, her figure begins to fade away, right before Oshikiri's eyes, leaving him with many questions about this mansion, wondering if there might be a dimensional door to another world. In the next class, Wachiri stares at Fuji again, wondering about her, because today she acts as if nothing happened, and still seems cheerful, unlike the person he met last night. He thinks to himself that it must be a different person. He also considers that the Fuji he met last night might be from another dimension, who accidentally entered this world, or encountered him before returning to her original dimension. While he is lost in thought, staring at her for a long time, Fuji notices and turns to look at him. He pretends to look elsewhere, and does not mention the strange encounter to anyone. Wachiri thinks that if that's the case, there must be a dimensional door in his mansion that leads to another world, a world similar to this one, and perhaps Fuji is from that other world. However, he still wonders how she ended up in his house. After a while, Bushiji approaches him, handing him the class notebook, since it is his turn today. She then asks him if he really has nothing to say to her today, noticing the way he looks at her, as if he has something to say, or wants to ask her something. Oshikiri says that he doesn't want to talk to her, or that he isn't looking at her, but Fuji replies, "Really?" because she secretly saw him looking at her. However, she doesn't say anything further, before leaving the notebook with him and walking away. Then, Uyama, a classmate, walked over and teased Oshikiri, saying he was interested in Fuji because he saw them chatting closely. He also remarked that someone as shy as Oshikiri wasn't suitable for her, even belittling him by saying he was much shorter than Fuji. He joked that if they walked together, it would look ridiculous. The mockery from his classmate made Oshikiri furious, and he lunged to fight back. Since Oshikiri had never fought anyone before, he ended up getting hit by Aoyama instead. Fuji, who was watching, had to step in to separate the two. That night, the anger from being humiliated by Matoi in front of his friends kept him awake. Suddenly, amidst the silence, he heard his name being called. When he listened closely, the voice came from the door of his room. When he opened the door, he encountered Aoyama, who had a gigantic body and a slimy appearance, shouting his name and threatening to kill him. Upon seeing this, Oshikiri almost screamed, realizing it was the monstrous figure of Aoyama. Aoyama slowly reached out to grab him, but suddenly, that figure began to melt into a liquid-like substance. The next day, Oshikiri secretly observed Aoyama during class, to see if there was something unusual about him, but everything seemed normal. In the evening after school, Oshikiri walked home with Fuji. She mentioned that she had heard that Fushikiri's house was like a European mansion, and she wanted him to take her to see it for herself. Despite Oshikiri's attempts to dissuade her, she insisted on exploring the strange things in the house. Eventually, he couldn't resist her persistence and agreed to take her home. As they approached, she was excited from the moment she saw the house's wall. Oshikiri warned her that it was still not too late to turn back, but Fuji ignored him, saying that since they were already there, she had to take a look. Since he couldn't stop her, he decided to tell her about his experiences, explaining that this house had a passage to another world, but it wasn't a door that could be easily entered and exited. In that alternate dimension, everything resembled their world, because he had seen someone who looked like him before. He warned her one last time not to get involved in supernatural matters, but Fuji insisted on going in, saying she didn't believe in such things. She also remarked that his claim of seeing someone who looked like him sounded unbelievable. Oshikiri expressed that he wished it were just an illusion as he led her through the wall of the house, reminding her to be cautious. However, as soon as they passed through the wall, Fuji disappeared, which surprised Oshikiri greatly. No matter how hard he searched, he couldn't find her, and 3 days passed without her coming to school. He thought she must have entered another world when she walked through the wall of the house. While he was pondering what had happened, he suddenly heard a strange sound outside. When he went to check, he encountered a bizarre creature that resembled a layer of liquid flesh. However, the voice he heard sounded like Fuji's, accusing him of being the one who caused her to end up in this state. She demanded that he return her to normal, or else she would curse him. It seemed that the angrier she got, the larger her form expanded, filling the hallway. Before long, her body burst, splattering a liquid substance everywhere, and she slowly melted away, leaving only a skull and a clump of hair that fell to the ground. Seeing this, he couldn't determine if that was Fuji in this world or in another dimension, even though the voice sounded like hers. If that was the case, then who was the real Fuji, his friend? If there is a being like this in another world, then something terrifying must be happening there. Just as he finished speaking, he suddenly found himself on the first floor after walking on the second, leaving him confused. While he was still in shock, he heard Fuji's voice coming from a nearby room. When he peeked in, he saw another version of himself holding a syringe, preparing to inject it into Fuji, who was tied up. At that moment, she was pleading and begging not to be treated like this, but the other him ignored her, stating that he couldn't stop because his experiment had just begun. He mentioned that the last time he experimented on Aoyama, it turned out that Aoyama had grown too large. Now, he was experimenting on Fuji in this dimensional world, and her body was too big and liquid-like. He wanted to leave the remains of the failed experiment in this dimension, so he could send the failed experiment back to the normal world. This was good news, because Fuji from that world had accidentally wandered in, providing a perfect opportunity to test a new drug he had just developed, hoping this time it wouldn't fail like the last. Hearing this, Fuji desperately pleaded to be released, unaware that she was begging the Oshikiri from the normal world. Just then, the normal world Oshikiri, who had been watching, rushed in to intervene before the other version could. As he lunged for her arm, both Oshikiri versions began to fight. However, in the end, the dimensional Oshikiri accidentally injected himself with his own syringe into his throat. Within moments, his body began to change. The substance injected caused his bones to stretch and grow larger in an instant, resulting in his skin tearing and his body twisting grotesquely. Fuji, witnessing this while still unable to distinguish between the two Oshikiri, began to cry. The familiar sight of Oshikiri brought her back to her senses, and she realized that this was the dimensional Oshikiri. Before his form disintegrated, he threatened them, saying not to think that killing him would end things, as there were countless other dimensional beings, and they shouldn't forget that there were still many Oshikiri at home engaged in experiments. Then, his form completely dissolved. However, after Oshikiri managed to hold on to Fuji, she asked him if they could still return to their original world. Before he could answer, another Oshikiri appeared from behind them, and they were unaware of it. Teacher Yad over there. It opens at the school in the morning after the summer break ends, where all the students show signs of not wanting to return to class. This is unlike Kayama, the class leader, who walks in looking refreshed, because he loves studying and often ranks at the top of the class. After he enters the classroom, his friend Sato quickly asks to copy homework. Just then, a nail suddenly flies into the homework notebook, and Kayama realizes it's Soichi's doing, who likes to shoot it at his friends. Kayama walks over to warn him, saying he's reflecting the teacher, but Soichi just sits there with a deadpan expression, pretending not to know and smiling to cover it up. Moments later, teacher Yanahida walks into the room, giving Kayama the chance to report Soichi immediately. However, it seems the teacher also has a family in the forest, ready to shoot as well, which confuses all the students in the room as to why the teacher seems so strange today, almost like a different person. It turns out that it's not the real teacher, as everyone should have noticed, but a giant doll created by Soichi, enchanted to bring it to life and give it the memories of that person. albeit incorrectly. This leads to the giant doll, Teacher Nun, playing with Soichi in front of the building during break, surprising teachers and students passing by, wondering why the teacher is engaging in such strange behavior. Some students begin to notice that the teacher's skin looks like it's made of fabric. In class, the teacher teaches chaotically, mixing subjects, even teaching math with kindergarten-level numbers, which frustrates students. One student can't take it anymore and stands up to confront the teacher, only to be punished by being told to run around the field 100 times, for not listening, which the teacher claims is why they don't understand. However, since the teacher is still the teacher, the students must comply, leading to one student running around the field until exhausted. Meanwhile, Soichi watches and mocks him. The other students know that Soichi enjoys playing tricks and casting spells, so they ask him what he did to the teacher to make them act so strangely. Soichi, thinking of himself as a god above everyone, pretends not to know before running away. However, as he tries to jump over a wall, he is caught by Kayama, who pulls his pants down, revealing Soichi's backside in broad daylight. Unable to bear the embarrassment, Soichi is finally let go. That evening, feeling humiliated, Soichi devised a plan for revenge by casting a spell on Kayama, which resulted in Kayama waking up the next day, with a mustache, causing his classmates to laugh. However, some female students thought Kayama looked cool with the mustache. Shortly after, teacher Yanahida entered the classroom angrily, questioning why Kayama, being in elementary school, would dare to grow a mustache. The teacher then took out a razor to shave it off, but ended up tripping and accidentally cutting his own finger with the razor, without feeling any pain or bleeding. This made Kayama confident that teacher Yanahida must be just a giant doll. At that moment, as the teacher stood up, he used the razor to threaten Kayama's face, and it seemed the situation was escalating. Fortunately, teacher So came in just in time, stopping teacher Yanahida and saying that the principal was calling for him. Hearing this, teacher Yanahida stopped and walked towards the principal, imagining in his mind that he might receive a bonus. After a long conversation, teacher Yanahida left the room, and someone picked up the teacher's severed finger, realizing it wasn't a real finger, but rather a fake one. While everyone in the room was in chaos, Fei-chi, who was watching the events from a distance, had an unhappy expression, as everyone began to realize that teacher Yanahida was a fake. When teacher Soga heard this, she instructed some students to meet her at the staff house in the evening, because she wanted to test something related to teacher Yanahida. The next day, news spread that teacher Yanahida had strangled the principal and disappeared. That evening, while the summoned students were waiting for teacher Soga, a dark shadow resembling her appeared. However, when her face hit the light, all the students were shocked to see that teacher Soga looked like a scary fabric doll. She then chased the children away, and when Sato stumbled and fell, she used a rope to strangle Kayama. Seeing this was not good, Kayama looked around and spotted a campfire with someone sitting nearby, so he decided to grab a burning branch and jab it into her eyes, causing flames to erupt. Since she was a doll made of fabric, the fire quickly spread, and she could not withstand it, ultimately running away. Afterward, all the friends agreed that the only person capable of orchestrating such events and being behind everything must be Soichi. They then decided to secretly watch Soichi at his house, just as he was leaving, giving them the chance to sneak in and see what he was really up to. They then discover the truth that Soichi is secretly creating a doll of Wakayama, but it seems incomplete as it still lacks both arms. They come up with a plan to wait for Soichi to finish creating the doll, so they can find out how teacher Yanahida and the real teacher Soga feel and where they are. They will have Kota keep an eye on Soichi. The next morning, chaos erupts at the school when the burned Kusoga doll goes on a rampage, harming students. Meanwhile, Soichi has successfully created the Wakayama doll and has cast a spell on it, ordering it to run around the school naked 100 times as punishment for making him embarrassed. At that moment, Kota, who has been watching, comes out to expose Soichi's evil plan. Upon realizing this, Soichi quickly tries to flee his house, but the command he gave to the doll starts to take effect, causing the Wakayama doll to chase after him, leading to confusion and chaos. Suddenly, the Kuyanang-heda doll appears and invites Soichi to play nail shooting, but Soichi declines, saying he is busy following up on the latest doll's performance. At the school, the Kusoga doll continues its rampage until it encounters Wakayama, who has collapsed from exhaustion because his own doll has drained his energy. Before he can say anything, his doll runs past quickly. When the Kusoga doll sees this, it unleashes its pent-up rage, leaping to attack the Wakayama doll and tearing its head off. At the same time, Soichi is running away from the Kuyanang-heda doll, but he gets hit by nails shot at him. In the end, while trying to climb over a fence to escape, he is caught by the Kuyanang-heda doll, which pulls down his pants, exposing Soichi's backside once again. At that moment, the students in the school can no longer bear it and decide to lift the curse from all the dolls. This causes all the dolls he created with the curse to calm down and return to being ordinary, lifeless dolls. Finally, the strange events of the second term come to an end. The next day, they find the real teacher Soga unconscious in an apartment, and they encounter teacher Yanahida sitting by a fire in the park, looking downcast. They have been rescued, and Wakayama returns to normal. The car has disappeared, but on Soichi's side, he remains the same Soichi